A Great Argead Saga ALEXEIN, Alexander the Great. Volume 1, Telesias, The War Dance. By Naki. Episode 52-2, Ekstasis and the Divine Comedy. Vibrant and luxurious night sky. The light was silver and ethereal, yet undeniably real. Two men stood exposed in the moonlight, seeking one another without hesitation. Even if it was just a fleeting moment between strangers knowing nothing beyond this raw impulse, it was real, passionate, and deeply compassionate, and that was all that mattered. For once, they were living a life a bit like what others might enjoy through the night, a quiet rebellion of warmth against the cold world. Wherever this might lead, could this be the hand of Isis, the supreme mistress of magic and sorcery, who used her immense power to protect the vulnerable, heal the sick, and weave resurrection from the dead? Sending this man to him? Was the world's blind randomness, much like the democratic sortition Athens celebrated to distribute power by lot, just another accidental occurrence? Or was it a divine comedy orchestrated by the gods to pierce their armor, awakening their souls even if it risked tearing them apart from within? Demetrios' tongue explored and savored his. He was an exquisite kisser, possessing a grace that made him feel as though he could be a son of Apollo, or akin to the divine favorites of myth, like Ganymede or Hylas. Whatever or whoever Demetrios truly was, he was the man Menander needed, the man he wanted, losing themselves together to fly, to run, or to hide. The night was only just beginning, a cooler breeze turning into soothing comfort as they moved to explore each other further, into the depths of the night and into the incandescent depths of one another. The night of the Dionysian festival descended like a heavy velvet curtain, thick with the scent of pine resin and the static charge of impending human excess. Lysandra pulled her hooded cloak tight, the wool coarse against her skin, and stepped into the gloom, her boots silent as she turned toward the dense, suffocating shadows of the woods. Beside her walked Menander, the high priest of the cult of Isis. Lysandra moved with him as his shadow, playing the part of a devotee. Whether the divinity of Isis was a living truth, or a comforting fiction, mattered little to her. She was interested in the mechanics of their faith. Their mission, this crusade to salvage the remnants of humanity through unconditional love, was, if nothing else, a necessary balm. It was a kindness rooted in the desperate need to save oneself by saving others. Let them believe, she thought, watching the candlelight catch the silver of his vestments. If their goddess offers a vision beautiful enough to heal the fractures caused by the Athenian mind, then it is a weapon worth wielding. Their devotion was still in its infancy, clumsy and uncertain. Yet as she walked beside him, she felt a strange, quiet fulfillment. The world was starving for new light, for a vision that transcended the old, broken systems of logic. By positioning themselves as saviors to the lost, they were, in turn, saving themselves. It was, she decided, a pragmatic good. This was her second journey into the dark, but the curiosity that drove her had mutated. It was no longer a cold academic study, it was a hungry, predatory instinct. She did not want to merely observe the fray, she wanted to dissect it. She needed to map the architecture of this madness, to understand how the wine acted as a solvent, eating away the calcified layers of Athenian civility, until nothing remained but the raw, pulsating nerves of the human animal. She was looking for the seam where the god broke through, and she intended to be the one to stitch it shut. As she moved deeper into the trees, the air began to vibrate with a distant, rhythmic thrumming, the beat of framed drums and the high, discordant shriek of aulos pipes. What is it they truly seek? She wondered, her mind tracing the clinical possibilities. Is it an escape or a return? She crested a ridge and saw them. The clearing below was a swirling vortex of torches and wine-flushed skin. They moved with a frantic, uncoordinated grace, their faces twisted into masks of ecstatic release. It was a liberation of the mind from the suffocating, narrow cage of everyday life, a temporary, violent salvation bought with the price of sanity. They believed they were touching the divine, inviting the god to tear through the thin veil of their mortal limitations and occupy the space where their reason used to be. They call it divine intervention, she thought, her gaze sharpening as she watched a magistrate, stripped of his dignity and his robes, weeping openly as he clawed at the earth. I call it a controlled collapse. They are not meeting a god. They are meeting the darkest, most neglected corners of their own psyches. They are using the chaos as a mirror, hoping that by destroying their order, they might find a truth that survives the wreckage. She watched a group of women circle a fire, their voices rising in a discordant primal chorus that made the fine hairs on her arms stand on end. They were not merely drinking, they were undergoing a radical temporary dissolution of the self. This is the true danger of the house and the woods alike, she realized, a cold shiver racing down her spine. It is the same surrender. Whether it is the soft gilded rot of the house or the wild tearing frenzy of these woods, the goal remains the same, the total abdication of responsibility. They want to be empty. They want to be filled by something else, anything else, so they do not have to look at the crumbling ruins of their own lives. Lysandra crouched behind the gnarled roots of an ancient oak, her breath hitching as the frenzy reached a fever pitch. She was an intruder in their holy terror, a surgeon in the midst of a massacre. She would watch, she would catalog, and she would learn the exact frequency of their abandonment. If she was to manipulate the power structures of Pella, she had to master the art of the whisper. And in these woods, beneath the frantic screams of the saved, she would find the deepest, most dangerous whispers of all. "Why don't you want to dance?" A woman materialized from the swirling shadows, her eyes glassy, her breath heavy, with the scent of unmixed wine and wild oregano. She leaned into Lysandra's space, a frantic pulse beating at the base of her throat. "I am new to this," Lysandra replied, her voice carefully neutral. "Why do you dance?" The woman threw her head back, laughing a sound that was more of a sob. "I want to feel good. To feel human. At least to lose the jagged edges of myself for an hour. I don't reach the heights as easily as the others, but sometimes I feel it. Something above me. A light, not the harsh, judging glare of the daylight sun, but something ethereal. Liquid. Warm." She swayed, her hands clutching at the air as if trying to hold smoke. "When I touch it, the worries of the world just dissolve. I am surrounded by its pulse. It's energy." "Energy," Lysandra mused, the word feeling clinical and cold on her tongue. "You need to feel it to understand," the woman insisted, reaching out a trembling hand. "Do you want to dance with me? Why not?" Lysandra thought, a sudden, sharp curiosity piercing her caution. "Believe it or not, I'd better try. Feel it or not, I will have the data." She stepped into the circle. She immediately tried to anchor her logos, her mind, but it was a caged hawk. It was a burden, this relentless, hyper-analytical machinery. It parsed every movement, every bead of sweat, every dilated pupil. It was a mind that examined everything, including the examiner, trapped in a recursive loop of observation. She took a sip of the wine, carefully measured, just enough to blur the edges of her perception. Around her, they were transfixed, transcendental. They were bleeding into another variation of reality, one manufactured by the desperate architecture of their own internal longings. What are they actually feeling? She analyzed, even as her feet began to move. Are they experiencing the divine, or are they simply drowning their consciousness in endorphins and kinetic exhaustion? "Stop it," she commanded herself. "How do I shut down this cycle? This mind runs me. I am a passenger in my own skull." She thought of the young Aristotle, that titan of sharp observation and supreme, suffocating ego, the archetype of male authority who deemed the world a puzzle to be solved by his own intellect. She realized with a jolt of irony that she mirrored him. She did it better, with more nuance, but she lacked his superior blindness. She looked at the men here, supreme, self-important, underestimating everything they could not control, and she felt nothing but a cold, burning disdain. She did not want to be above all. She wanted to be gone. "I don't want to think." "Switch off." She focused on the sensory, the visceral. She ignored the voice in her head that catalogued her every failure. She threw her body into motion, mimicking the others. She pushed into the frantic, the ridiculous, the devilish. She acted the lunatic. She began to laugh. The laughter began as a dry, forced rattle, the last vestige of her defensive cynicism, but then it ascended. It tore through her, a geyser of pure, unadulterated joy that felt like the rusted hinges of a cage door finally springing open. Something was shedding from her soul, layer upon layer of calcified skepticism that had armored her against the world. A strange, radiant warmth bloomed behind her ribs, a heat that felt less like fever and more like a kill firing clay into porcelain. "I feel it," she thought. the shock of it vibrating through her marrow. I love it. Give me more. Free me, she commanded, her internal monologue shattering like glass under a hammer. Freed, the world detonated. The physical plane, the suffocating reality of the clearing, the stench of unwashed bodies, the jagged, abrasive edges of her own analytical mind, was pulverized into a fracture of blinding, prismatic white light. Everything that had anchored her to the earth vanished. She was no longer Lysandra. She was a consciousness untethered, steeped in an ethereal, surreal smoothness. It was a realm of divine, powdered light, where the air itself felt like liquid silk sliding over a raw, exposed soul. Her body, now a distant instrument, moved with a terrifying, liquid grace. She was not the choreographer, she was the spectator to a symphony of natural motion. Every muscle stretched and coiled with a wisdom that had nothing to do with human anatomy, and everything to do with the ancient, unwritten rhythm of the cosmos. She shifted her perspective, tilting her inner gaze downward. She saw herself, a woman dancing on the forest floor, a flickering shadow of motion amidst the torches, but the she down there felt like a suit of heavy iron armor she had finally stepped out of period. She was omnipresent, vibrating in the shimmering air above, a ghost haunting her own life. Is this it? She marveled, the question bubbling up through the ecstasy. Is this the chaos Dionysius promises? This divine, unmaking madness? She saw the patterns of the universe shifting beneath her, a grand, cosmic entanglement that made the struggles of Pella and the machinations of kings appear like the frantic, pointless movements of insects. She felt the world spinning in a rhythm that was nothing short of a theocommodia, a divine comedy, an absurd, beautiful, and devastating tragedy that existed only to be laughed at. Why Pella? She wondered, the political weight of her life feeling suddenly microscopic. Then she heard it, not with her ears but with the foundation of her being, "Welcome back, my child." His voice carried an undeniable, godlike authority, stripped of all human ego. It was a pure, definitive statement of existence. She briefly wrestled with the fear of hallucination, but the echo of it resonated through her, enveloping her with a warmth she had never experienced in the cold halls of men. Delusion or reality, it did not matter. It was true to her, and she craved more. She felt loved, embraced, enveloped, and raptured, lifted up into the golden, atomic realm where the Olympians reside. Take me, my lord, my ancestor, you who created this broken world through chaos, through the dark war dance of creation. She was dancing, battling within herself, channeling her own Telesias, the woman of conquest within. She understood now. Chaos does not destroy. It clears the ground for a new order. The absurdity was the point of the divine comedy. How narrow her human perception had been, how foolish to view the tapestry of the gods through the eyes of a mortal accountant. If you are truly Dionysus, wash me over. Enlighten me. Free me from this intellectual cage, from this automatic, relentless analyzation. Replace it with purpose, with a divine agenda. That is why you created this world and us within it, isn't it? The realization struck her with the force of a physical blow, and she began to laugh. It was a deep, guttural sound, vibrating from the very center of her being, echoing against the stars. The more she laughed, the more the world's heavy, somber rules dissolved into mist. It is divine, she thought, the realization humming through her spirit like a choir of glass bells. It is pure, unadulterated love, not the grasping, transactional love of men, but the vast, terrifying, all-consuming love of the abyss. How beautiful this chaos was. How perfectly it mirrored the heart of everything. She looked up, and her consciousness, Ekstasis, groaned under the weight of the vision. Above her hung hierarchies of intensity that defied human comprehension, great, swirling nebulae of gold and violet, a ladder of light, a celestial staircase forged from the dreams of gods. Lysandra screamed, a sound that was half laughter, half prayer, a jagged bridge between her mortal agony and this sudden, intoxicating rapture. She let go of the last fraying rope of herself. The intellect, the cauterized analyst, the weary survivor, the old Lysandra, drifted away like autumn leaves, a brittle gray shell abandoned in the dirt. She was no longer observing the fire. She was the fire. She was Semele, the mortal beloved, incinerated by the unfiltered majesty of the god, only to be resurrected in the ash of her own undoing. The self-initiation was complete, a brutal alchemy that turned her blood into wine and her skepticism into devotion. I shall become his priestess, she thought, the words carving themselves into the bedrock of her existence. For the first time in her life, the persistent, nagging voice of the auditor went silent. She did not calculate the risk. She did not weigh the political leverage of her surrender. She simply opened her mouth, tilted her soul toward the blinding peak of the god's intensity, and drank the light until she was nothing but a vessel for his storm. Let the great work begin. The vow crystallized within her, no longer a mere thought, but a command etched into the very marrow of her being. I am the catalyst, the bridge between the crumbling wreckage of the old order and the terrifying, beautiful architecture of the new. Lead me. Guide me. I will follow wherever you demand, for I have finally unlearned the cowardice of reason. She felt the intoxicating pull of the abyss, a siren song that promised not destruction, but a radical, transformative birth. I shall live fully within this beautiful mess. I embrace this divine chaos, this sacred violence that is required to forge a world anew. Let the old structures burn, let the boundaries between city-states dissolve, and let the fire of this upheaval spread until all of Hellas, and everything beyond its reach, is united beneath a new sun. Her focus expanded, radiating outward from her own ecstasy, to the lost souls shivering in the dark corners of Athens. I will not be the only one. She would be the torch. She would reach into the suffocating gloom where her sisters and brothers languished, trapped by the stale, suffocating logic of the men who ruled them. She would offer them the same wine, the same unmaking, the same shattering of the self. Whether they were noble women suffocating under the weight of expectations, or men crushed by the relentless grinding gears of Athenian duty, she would find them. I will free them, she vowed, her spirit surging with the authority of the god. I will offer salvation to whoever seeks it, whoever is brave enough to demand divine intervention to break their own chains. I will turn them from subjects of a dying city into architects of a new world. They will learn that to change the world, they must first become the chaos that destroys it. She was no longer merely a woman seeking power. She was the herald of a revolution. As she stood in the heart of the woods, she envisioned the clearing not as a secret meeting place, but as the first crater of an explosion that would reshape the geography of the human soul. She would gather them, the broken, the forgotten, the seekers, and together they would dance the world into its next terrifying incarnation. To be continued in episode 52, Road to Thebes. A great Argead Saga ALEXEIN. Volume 1, Telesias, the War Dance. A new episode every single day. We are dropping a new episode every day until the epic conclusion of Volume 1. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 15 to 30-minute hit of cinematic historical drama, perfect for your daily plunge into antiquity. Watch and listen now. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full saga now. Bookmark Volume 1, Telesias playlist. Bookmark Volume 1, Divine Oracle playlist. Join the Vanguard. Subscribe to follow the bloody rise of the Argead dynasty. Thumbs up to help push our Vanguard through the algorithm's gauntlet. Comment below.